All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been going over the PowerPoint slides for JavaScript 6th edition by Rodnick and Goslin, the Web Warriors series. And we're in we're in chapter 7. And we're talking about object-oriented programming. And this is the second half of the presentation. So notice we're talking about declaring basic custom objects. You can assign values to the properties of an object when the object is first instantiated. So in other words, we're creating a new object here because it's within curly braces. All right. The object's name is performance tasks. It has 4 fields in it. It's got a field that's named customer name, whose value is currently Claudia Salomon. It's got a field name that's performance name, its value is currently Swan Lake. It's got a field called ticket quantity, and its value is 2. And it's got a value that's called performance date, and its value is, I think it's June 18th, 2017. I'm not sure what the 20 in there is, don't remember. Might be 8 p.m. 2000 hours. All right, the value of a property can be another object, so you can have an object within an object. Here they call it a sub-object. Now, in some languages, when you have one object that becomes a member of another object, it's called composition, just so you hear the term. So, you've got order, and within that order object, there's an order number, and then there's an address object, which has a street, city, state, and zip in it. So it's an object within an object, totally legitimate. All right, referring to object properties as associative arrays. The thing is, when you work with an array, what we've looked at thus far, I'll show you this very quickly. I don't want to get too far off topic, but just to show you this, that if I did something like this, if I said var states equal, and let's just put 4 states in here. So we'll put in Missouri, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan. All right, doing it this way, the way I've just shown you here, that's the equivalent of me saying var states equal bracket bracket, and then saying states zero equals Missouri. You get the idea here, but I'm going to keep going anyway. So states 1, states 2, and states 3. All right, so we've got Illinois, we've got Wisconsin, and we've got Michigan. All right, so these are exactly the same thing. The problem is, if you notice, the states are not in any kind of natural order. They're not in alphabetic order, etc. So if they're in any order, I don't know the order in which they are. It would be a lot nicer to be able, to not have to remember that states 0 is Missouri and states 2 is Wisconsin, etc. It'd be nicer if there was a way that you could do that, and you can. When you set this up, and I want to make sure, I'm going to jump back into the notes and make sure I'm giving you the right syntax before we do this. So when you use an associative array, instead of having element numbers, you have arithmetic keys. All right? It says you can use an associative array to refer to the properties of an object. So notice here we're saying stoplight caution instead of saying stoplight yellow. All right? And it says how you can do this. Now I believe what I'm about to show you, again, I think that this is right. I thought that you used a different symbol, but looking at what they have there, it looks as though we could have also done this. All right, now to say, instead of 0, like this, we could have said var mo and then a colon, Missouri, var IL with a colon, Illinois, var WI, colon, Wisconsin, and var MI for Michigan. Now, in some languages, and I thought that JavaScript was the same, but in some languages you don't do it like that. You do it like this. You use an equal sign followed by a greater than sign. All right? But the point is, now, if I do it this second way, instead of referring to, if I want to refer to the state of Missouri, instead of saying states sub-0, I can say states sub-MO. So there's a lot more naturalness, for lack of better words, to doing it this way. And I think it makes a lot more sense. Again, you may or may not agree. You don't have to do it that way. All right? But to me, it sure makes sense to do it that way. All right. You can also write generic code to add new object properties that incorporate numbers. All right. So you could use numbers if you wanted to. I don't know why you'd want to do that. You can mix numbers and strings, but again, I don't know why you would do that. All right, a method is simply a function with a name within the object. There's two ways that you can add a method to an object. You can provide the code, or as it says, you can reference an external function. So you can specify the name with an anonymous function. Remember, an anonymous function doesn't have a name. We're going to look at these in more depth and breadth of coverage later, but you're going to see those. Okay? So you can specify a method name with an existing function as a value. So notice what we have here. We've got this order, which is going to be an object, and inside it's got another object named items. All right? Reference to an existing function cannot have parentheses. Gets a little bit hairy, for lack of better words. Not every language does it the same way. In fact, in many ways, JavaScript is unique. All right, enumerating custom object properties. Custom objects can contain dozens of properties. When you think about having a custom object named human, we mentioned eat, drink, sleep, but there's a lot of other things. Think of all the different things that people do. All right. If you want to be able to go through and work your way, iterate through a custom object, you can use a for in loop. All right. This is not to change objects, but it's if you want to go work your way through an object. Okay. So here's an example. They're checking for empty values. So you're working your way through this whole thing to see if any of the properties inside of here were empty. I think they probably meant to call that order or else meant to call that item, but I don't know. Again, not being the author, I'm not sure. All right. To delete a property, you use the delete operator, the name of the object you just created, dot property. So you don't need something anymore. You can also have what are known as constructor functions. And this is interesting because, as we mentioned before, one of the things that makes JavaScript object-based versus object-oriented is you don't exactly create a class. But in object-oriented programming languages where you do create a class, you typically call a constructor. And that's the same kind of constructor that we have here. It says also known as object definition. It's typically where you do your initialization. JavaScript objects inherit all the variables and statements of the constructor function on which they're based. Okay, so here's an example. Define a function that can serve as a constructor function. What this says is when you create a new order, it expects that you're going to give it a number, an order, a payment, and a ship. And then you'll copy them to all the associated variables. Okay. You can create a function to use as an object method. As it says, you can refer to object properties using this. Okay. Oops. Oh, that was good. After you instantiate or create a new object, you can add additional properties to it. This is very unique. Most languages are not like this. The new properties are only available to that object. However, if you use what's called the prototype property, all right, when you use that with the name of the constructor function, then any new properties that you create will be available in the constructor function. Now, does that make sense? No, it'll make more sense when we look at it in class. All right. So you use the prototype property to extend an object, to make it do things it could not do otherwise. All right, so that's pretty much it for this chapter. So in this chapter, we had a primer or a beginning to talk about object-oriented programming. I gave you my own take on classes and objects and a few other things, but we went through the authors, definitions for classes, objects, information hiding, encapsulation, etc. There's other things. There's inheritance. And I'm not even sure if JavaScript supports inheritance, but I think it does, where I can have a parent class and then a child class underneath it, and the child inherits everything from the parent. And there's something that's called polymorphism. Again, I don't think that JavaScript supports that, but it stands for many forms. So if I create an object that's called animal, and the animal has a speak method, then I can create objects underneath animal that are called like dog, cat, and bird. And if I tell a dog to speak, it'll say woof. If I tell a cat to speak, it'll say meow. If I tell a bird to speak, it'll say tweet. And it will know which way to speak based on the type of object it's being used with. Now, if that confuses you, you can just, as I'm taking a class online, and as the instructor would say, have a Google and just look up polymorphism. So that's it for this chapter. When I return in a few minutes, I'm going to come back and go over Chapter 8. And Chapter 8 is on JavaScript, strings, and arrays. Now, we've talked about arrays already, but we're going to talk about more of the methods in arrays and some of the stuff we have not yet talked about. So I'll be back with that shortly.